If you go to the Patterns tab in the Instrument Editing panel, you can access the built-in pattern system. Each instrument slot can have up to 8 patterns loaded. The instrument will only play one pattern at a time, but you can have multiple instrument slots patterns layered together. That way you can hold down a single key and have multiple instruments play their patterns together. Let me run through the controls and then I'll cover the actual pattern editor in a separate video. So when you select a pattern slot, you'll see some additional controls appear. I'll start out by loading a pattern by clicking on the magnifying glass icon there and load one. So from left to right, you have the name of the pattern, and then you've got this button here that you can click and drag, and that drags the pattern out as a MIDI clip. That way you can drag it out into your DAW. But of course you can also just work with the patterns directly inside of the instrument. Next you have an Omni button, and what that does is it makes the pattern slot available or playable from any MIDI channel, not just the MIDI channel that the instrument slot is currently assigned to. Then you have the key that the pattern is mapped to, and you can change that by clicking and dragging on the note name or using this button, this keyboard icon button, to toggle the MIDI learn option and then press the key on your keyboard to map it to that key. You can also have each pattern mapped to up to 2 keys by clicking on this button there, or you can use the MIDI learn option and then just play the 2 keys at the same time. And that's really handy in case you want one key to trigger patterns with multiple instrument slots and then have the individual patterns, the same exact patterns available one by one on separate keys. So next there's the magnifying glass. This opens the browser that I showed you before. And there are also these arrow buttons here that let you cycle between the different available patterns. And finally, you can clear the pattern slot by using this X button there. I mentioned earlier that the instrument only plays one pattern at a time. Let me show you how that works. So I'll load a pattern in the first slot, and I'll map it to C1. And then in the second slot, I'll load a different pattern and use the MIDI learn option to map that to D2. And now when I press C1, it'll play the first pattern slot, which you can see by that speaker icon lighting up. And if I press D1, it'll trigger the second pattern. Now, if I have C1 held, and then without releasing the key, I press D1, it'll switch over to that second pattern. So it's only playing one pattern at the same time, but the cool part is I can release the key with the C1 still held, and it'll just switch back to that first slot. And that's really nice in case one of your patterns has fills or something like that that you want to intermittently add to your pattern. As long as you don't release any keys, it'll keep the position in the pattern synced. And that way you can easily switch between patterns, different patterns or patterns with fills in real time and end up with a much more dynamic sounding part just by switching through patterns throughout your sequence.